thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes to join us as we explore what we're going to be talking about and why we're doing this podcast. So, Morgan, why should anybody listen to us to get any kind of advice at all about work and the world of work?
That's an excellent question. So I think for me personally, I think I have a reputation for just kind of telling it like it is. And I always really appreciate it when people are just upfront with me about what the deal is in anything. And I have a wide variety of experience in technology, from software development to data center, bringing new SaaS products to market, professional services, et cetera. And I thought, you know what? I've seen a lot of things go right and a lot of things go wrong. And man, I wish someone had told me X. Or someone could have given me some tools to check myself when I was getting into precarious situations. So I really wanted to do this podcast and give people super honest, real life advice that's practical to use and hopefully entertain people along the way.
Yeah. And I think I'm in the same boat, right? Like I've been in the world of work for almost 25 or 30 years. I started out as an engineer and quickly moved into the world of talent, particularly talent around technology. And I have seen a lot of different things. Was a partner at Great Place to Work and a senior consultant at Gallup. And so I've kind of seen every type of environment and how easy it is to screw up an organization based on an idea or a concept or a practice that isn't implemented well or isn't implemented with the best intentions in mind. And so I just want to help people avoid that kind of stuff. And the other thing I think that is really important to me, like you said, is just peeling back the onion or the sheets or I don't know, whatever the thing is that we want to peel back so that we can show people what is it that really happens in an organization and how one action can have a ripple effect to create a culture that you might not want or make things ineffective. So
yeah, I think that's even more critical for small business owners. Like I've worked with a lot of channel partners in my time. We're talking about organizations under 100 people, viable businesses. But when something goes bump in the night in a small organization, it's highly impactful and can ultimately lead to that organization going under. And I just think so much of this is preventable. And hopefully by listening to this podcast, you can prevent some of those things from happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would even extend that to small parts of a large organization, right? Like, you know, we live in a world that's so interconnected now. We just have to get better at being able to predict or anticipate what's going to happen with a thoughtful and careful eye. So what can listeners expect from Monster in My Closet? What are some of the things that we might talk about in this podcast?
Well, at a high level, the Monster in My Closet is really about addressing things that either scare you in the workplace or things that are scary in the workplace. And the reason fear is at the center of this is because really poor decisions get made when you're coming from a place of fear or when you are forcing people to follow you through scare tactics, if you will. So when I looked at the top 20 reasons why small businesses fail in technology, over half of them were kind of interpersonal. These are like group dynamic things that if you'd have got in front of it, you would still be in business, kind of thing. And I think the fact that so many of these things are preventable really made me want to do this podcast. And that is what we're going to be covering: things that scare you in the workplace and things that are scary in the workplace. For instance, asking hard questions, being brave enough to ask a question, being fearful of losing a client, and the types of behaviors that might drive. And I know, Anil, you have some topics that are close to your heart as well coming up in the future.
Yeah. How to deal with change, how to really avoid bad hiring decisions, how to make sure that you're not kind of doubling down on a failing project or a failing initiative, how to overcome biases. We're even going to explore diversity, inclusion, and equity, and how those programs play in organizations. And we're going to really look at that in each episode. We're going to dedicate one topic per episode, and we're going to do a deep dive on it to really understand, why does this happen? And most importantly, how, in a real practical, repeatably executable way, that you can either avoid it, overcome it, or get around it, or get out of the situation if you're in it. And we're going to leave listeners with research and real ways that they're going to be able to explore that topic fully. And we're going to try to do all of that in about 25 minutes, maybe 30, right?
Yeah. The show notes are going to be really important, the leave behinds and the research you were talking about. So everything that we find in the course of doing our research for each podcast, we will organize that in an easily referenceable format for our listeners to reflect on. So if we do give you takeaways or advice, you'll have that handy cheat sheet that you can refer to after the podcast.
Yeah. And I think, the other important thing here is that neither Morgan and I are Ivy League professors or management gurus or therapists or licensed professionals I'm not a licensed professional in any way, shape, or form, but we have been leaders, and we have seen how things work, and we are able to help listeners really be able to bridge those gaps in ways that aren't going to make them completely look like assholes, and that they're going to be able to keep their sanity and not lose their kind of souls in the process, right? You don't have to sell yourself out in order to solve problems. And that's a really important part of what we want to make sure that people hear along the way. So we're going to give you a bunch of tools and things like that. And I will likely make at least one stupid analogy about food in every episode. That's right. And usually it'll be gross, or at least memorable, but something like that.
I love the idea of this kind of actionable takeaway, practical advice. I don't know, Anil, if you've ever been to a seminar where they're like, hey, come to this seminar. We're going to teach you how to implement X.
Right.
And you're listening to the seminar and you're like, wow, that doesn't ring true with my reality. That seems very idealistic. What about this? What about, I know I'm going to overcome, I'm going to face these challenges, and they don't even talk about these potential challenges along the way. And instead of feeling uplifted after a seminar like that, I end up feeling depressed because I want to do the right thing and I want to improve my circumstances, but there's all these obstacles I'm not entirely sure how to overcome. And I really feel like it's important throughout this podcast and the show notes that we are giving to our listeners the reality of the obstacles that you might run into in the course of implementing these suggestions, and give you ideas of how to circumvent those.
Yeah, yeah, and we are really going to make sure that you understand that, right, none of these things are easy necessarily, but they're doable, right? And they are things that you can implement, and we know because we've done it, we've implemented them. Sometimes they've been really successful, sometimes they are not, and we will tell you when they are not and
That's
help
right.
you avoid them.
We are not afraid to talk about failure.
Yeah, because we've had a lot of it. I mean,
Yes.
I have failed quite a bit. So, I think the one of the last things that we wanted to talk about here was, in this intro episode, was why are we doing this? Like, who is this podcast really for? If we were going to pick a person or persons that we wanted to identify, why are we doing this?
I think in a generic sense, this is for owners of businesses, entrepreneurs, and functional leaders to help improve their outcomes. But specifically, I really want to make the world of work a better place to be. I have always firmly believed that it's possible to love your work and be fulfilled from your work. And, you spend way over a third of your life at work. And that's a lot of time being miserable, especially when that can carry over into your personal life. So I believe, and I have seen in real life, instances where when things are done right, work is very fulfilling and enjoyable. And I just think everyone has a right to that. So in particular, I think about underrepresented groups, folks with disabilities, folks with neurodiversity. I think about my own daughter in the workplace and how I want things to be different for her as she is going through her career. And if I can do anything in this podcast to help smooth the road ahead for those groups and those individuals, that is what I'd like to do.
Yeah. And so you'll learn, if you listen to this podcast, that Morgan and I both have adult daughters. And that is a big inspiration for us, that we want to talk about things that we know are going to impact them and give them some real actionable advice to be able to take and implement, so that they can create their work environments in a way that is good for them and good for the people around them and good for the people in their lives. And that's a really important thing. And I think the other is that we want to make this for those people that want to know the real skinny about work, right? If you're a leader or you want to be a leader, right? We don't want to give you rose-colored glasses, but what is happening, how it's happening, and how to come out ahead, or at least a little less scathed. That's a really important thing. And, this podcast actually is a supporter of and a part of that Medusa, which is the nonprofit that you created, Morgan. And that really is all about creating the opportunity for the SaaS industry to be more inclusive, more diverse, but not in a like namby-pamby, touchy-feely necessarily kind of way. It's actually how to make the business better and more effective and more profitable by making it more inclusive to all different types of people who have all different kinds of experiences.
That's right. Yeah.
So I hope that sounds interesting to people. And I promise that we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about topics that really hit home, things that we know that you're dealing with, because we hear about it, we have lived through them, and we actually look for topics that are salient now, that are happening now, and kind of pick them apart and pull them apart so that we can help people get through and past what they need to get through and past.
We will say the quiet part out loud. Is what Anil's saying.
That's right. We will say.
We're going to talk about the stuff that nobody else wants to talk about.
Yeah, and probably in the way that nobody wants to say it in a corporate meeting, right? In your quote unquote town hall. They won't talk about stuff this way. And we're going to throw the fucking doors open and shine a big old light on all of those things that are scary or that you're scared about. And we're going to show you that it's actually not so bad. Or maybe it is, and you need to throw it out. Maybe you do. Maybe you just need to pitch it. And that's okay too. So, thank you so much for listening to the very first episode of Monster in My Closet. We're super excited to be doing this with and for you. We look forward to your feedback. Please make sure that you give us a rating on whatever podcast tool that you're utilizing, that you give us feedback, that you reach out to us, that you let us know what you like and what you don't like, what you want to hear more of, because this is all about you. Well, it's a little bit about us, but it's mostly about you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week on Monster in My Closet. Thanks.
Bye.